Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Centric. This being a show where I talk about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Notorious as well as the latest episode of The Blacklist. Starting off with Notorious, a lot of interesting developments in this episode. We ended up finding out that the whole pictures that Julia got sent about Oscar cheating, about Sarah having those bruises, turns out it wasn't fake. So that kind of throws out my theory that this was all some kind of like plan to kind of screw him over. I mean, who knows? Maybe that was part of it. I don't know. Like I said, me being the pessimist I am, I kind of just think the worst type of thing. And just because I'm just waiting for the real twist to kind of come and be like, oh, this is what this all really was, and like, you know. And it does seem like every episode that's happening, it does seem like that is going to be the case of like the overarching story is the whole Sarah situation. But every episode we also get another kind of other story to kind of like the Sarah thing at the very least for this season is going to be the overarching story. But then there's also going to be other stories kind of mixed in with it as well. But we ended up finding out that yes, Oscar did in fact hit Sarah, that those pictures were real, and he did cheat on her. But apparently he said that was taken like 5 years ago. I mean, all that happened 5 years ago. He ended the affair. Sarah forgave him, and they kind of worked on a relationship. I mean, whether that's 100% true or not, who knows? I mean, because we ended up finding out in this episode that basically he'd been really, over the past couple months, had been sexting and talking with someone online, someone with a screen name, Sweet Vicky. And, you know, because Jake just had the feeling it's like, that Oscar's been telling him everything that he wants to hear, not telling him everything that he needs to know. Because it's like, you need to tell me everything, because eventually it's going to come out, whatever secrets you are hiding. So Sweet Vicky ended up being one, but it's kind of like, he gets the feeling there's a lot more to it, because that's what Jake's plan was, to track down Sweet Vicky and kind of talk to her to find out what it is that Oscar's not willing to tell him and what he might have told her. Because it's like, oh, who's this Sweet Vicky he's been spilling all his secrets to? They end up tracking her down, but it comes to find out, like, she's not the one that he's been talking to. This particular person behind the handle is Sweet Vicky. All those pictures were of someone, but the lady even said the fact is it happens more often than she can actually mention. Like, the fact is it happens a lot more than you would think. So basically it shows that Oscar was being catfished. Interestingly enough, we end up finding out the person that was catfishing him was Levi. To what extent, I don't know, because Julia in this episode did, with Ryan's help, he ended up, figuring out, backtracking the envelope that the pictures came in, ended up getting a look at the security camera, ended up seeing it was Levi who dropped off the photos. Now, Julia's theory is that, okay, Levi's doing all this because he wants to, like, paint Oscar in a bad light, so that basically, I guess, the business will be like, okay, we need to kick him out, and him being a partner in it all kind of gets the next, he kind of takes up the new position, replaces Oscar essentially. And so, I mean, he was quick to deny it, be like, oh, I didn't take these pictures and whatnot. But then he obviously gave himself up when he finally admitted. He was like, so there was also a third picture that I included, the one of Jake and Sarah. And he's like, so if you come after me, telling me to be on your show, you try and out me with this whole situation, I'm going to out Jake. I'm going to take that picture to a different news station and have them blasted all over the place. So Julia kind of backs down. With something interesting in this episode, I don't really get her reasons why she does some of the stuff she does. For instance, she never told Jake about that whole situation, like Levi being the one that got the pictures. Like, he sent the pictures. Like, Jake had to figure that out, well, not necessarily on his own, with a combination of help from Ella and Ryan, because originally he was going like, okay, we need to find out who set this whole thing up, pretended to be Sweet Vicky and whatnot. So it's like, oh, we need a tech-savvy person. He was going to go to Levi for help, which is a good thing he didn't, because now all of it points to Levi pretending to be Sweet Vicky. I just kept stumbling, because every time I say that, I want to say Sweet Cat for some weird reason, or Sweet Kitty. I think that's just what initially comes to my brain instead of Vicky. I don't know. I think, a little bit of my brain's thinking like Fairly Odd Parents, so I'm thinking like, oh no, like anytime, I never associate the word Sweet and Vicky, because it's always Icky and Vicky, Anyone that's watched Fairly Odd Parents kind of understand what I meant by that. But nevertheless, but that's my thing. Like, why didn't Julia tell him that? I don't know. Like, it's not like she didn't have opportunity. Literally, like, after that meeting with Levi, she was hanging out with him, and it's like she just didn't say anything. So I don't know. And since I was speaking about Ella and Ryan, that was kind of an interesting situation because Ryan is still trying to prove himself. Megan's telling him, don't do anything stupid. He's like, don't worry, I won't do anything stupid. He goes off and does something stupid. Basically, he sits outside of Levi's house and he's hacking into him because basically Levi has two Wi-Fi networks, and he basically hacked into the second one that's very less secure because one is their business Wi-Fi, and it's got heavy protection on it, but the other one doesn't. And Ella kind of popped up at the same time he was doing this. She's like, this is super illegal. Why do you keep doing this? And essentially he kind of brings it up. We kind of already know it, obviously, but he wants to prove himself because he wants to show that he deserves this job because he's good at it, not just because his dad, kind of gave him the job. He wants to kind of stand on his own 2 feet, show that what he's capable of. And as we can tell, that's going to lead to him doing some very irrational stuff. Because remember last episode, Julia told him not to get caught up in any more stupid stuff because this is kind of his last chance, and he said he wasn't. And I immediately said, I already can tell that's not going to be the case. He's going to do something stupid. Which, granted, he did something stupid he did this, but granted, he didn't get caught. The cops did come, but I did like how they handled it. They were making out and everything, and the cops oh yeah, he was like, oh, why are you here in front of the house? He's like, I want to show her a house that I'd, buy for us, after she forgives me. He's like, oh, what did you do? He's like, I was an idiot. There's a long list of things I could pull from that I did wrong. And then the cop looks in, he's like, well, judging from that kiss, it seems like she's all in. And you see her kind of get a little flustered and everything, kind of have a little embarrassed look on her face and everything. So it's kind of there's some truth to that. Cause she kind of made it seem like, she's not even interested in Ryan, but it's even in, what was it, the first episode when they met, when she found out, oh, he was just using me, when she walked away, she was kind of smiling and everything. So it almost seems like a reflection of how Jake and Julia, they have that weird relationship of tick for tat type of situation. And that's why I'm trying to understand, I don't get their particular relationship and whatnot, but I think it's going to be interesting seeing where Ella and Ryan go from here. Because after everything went down, he's like, "Ooh, I'm hungry. Are you hungry? You want something to eat?" And she's kind of looking at him like, "Wait, what?" But then later on, you see them looking through the flash drive and all the stuff he downloaded from Levi's, and you see that they obviously got food together. So I'm very interested to see where that goes. Now, that's kind of covering the Oscar aspects of this episode. Another part of this episode was about a big-time singer named Trinity. Now, basically, he was basically in a coma. He had a stroke. At least that's what you think at the beginning of the episode. But it's up to Julia to basically run a tribute for him because I was he's such a great guy and everything, until Megan gets a video from a friend of a friend, and it's oh, he raped a girl. There's a video of it. And it turns into this whole situation because her boss is no, she basically aired it, had people there to authenticate that the video hadn't been tampered with, that there was no way that there was some different circumstances. It's yeah, she was definitely unconscious, whether it was because of drugs or something else, but just the way her body was positioned, the way her muscles were not, the way her body was positioned was proving that no, she was unconscious. So her boss, Julia's boss, gave her a ultimatum to, have kind of recant the story, just kind of make an apology, but oh, we got things wrong, or you can end up, losing your job. I can fire you. Because basically the company that owns their news station, the parent company, well, they also are control basically Trinity's music, so they have a big stake in it. So basically, if this comes out, it ruins his reputation. No one really cares about his money, his music, and so his music becomes kind of worthless. So it means they miss out on a large amount of money. They basically lose money at that point. So that's why her boss was trying to shut her up. Now, my thing about it is why I'm constantly I don't know if there's necessarily good people in the show or not, because as you can tell. I brought it up last time that they're with their powers, they can do good things and they can do bad things. And it seems like they do good things, but whether it's 100% for the right reasons or not, I don't know. It's because when Julia was oh, do you see what happened? All these people are calling in. You're going to end up winning an award for us telling this story. And it's it should that be your main thing going out? It shouldn't be like the first thing out your mouth should be like, we're showing this world that this guy's a monster. That should be the first thing that came out your mouth. I mean, you were disgusted by the video and everything, but when you're talking to your boss about the whole situation, you try to look at it from an analytic standpoint, and it's like, shouldn't you look at it from a more human standpoint? I don't know what it is. Like I said, I'm very interested to find out how Julia got the way she is, because it seems like she is very detached. Like she does, like when it comes to her job, like that comes first and everything else comes second. So, I mean, she was there to help out Alex because she brought along Jake and everything when she actually talked to Alex, because it's like the only way this is going to work is if she got the girl Alexa to kind of come forward to confirm the story and everything, put her on television and everything. And Jake was there to kind of say, like, no, I'll protect you. They tried to do anything, you know. But it's like Julia was there listening to her story. And it's like, it's moments like that. It's like, okay, you're there trying to get sympathy. But at the same time, you can't help but think in the back of your mind, it's like, are you doing it for the right reasons, though? It's like, part of me is like, part of you wants to do it for the right reasons. But the other part of you, it seems like all you care about is the ratings and stuff like that. And I don't know, it's quite sad that because like I said, maybe there's some stuff that in her past that kind of made her that way. Maybe there was someone in particular, like I said, a mentor or something that kind of made her that way, or just, I don't know, maybe something in her childhood, I don't know. Like Jake doesn't seem like he's always the most honorable person. He goes about things a very sly way, but at the same time, it's like, well, he's a lawyer, so that's kind of expected. Like, people kind of tack on scummy when it comes to lawyers because they kind of find this and that ways about going through things. And, I completely kind of skipped over it. At the beginning, we had Alan, Sarah's brother, on the show talking. Basically, he knew things weren't right with their relationship. That Oscar wasn't there for Sarah anytime she wanted him to kind of be there for. It seemed like he was just more focused on starting up the business and work. She kind of came second. And so when he saw the pictures of Oscar cheating, of her bruised, he wasn't too shocked, and he was basically saying, okay, Oscar's a murderer. But Jake talked to him and was basically like, I need back away from Oscar. Like, not in a very like, oh, back away from Oscar, just like, he doesn't believe Oscar did it. And it's like, I don't know. Like, currently, I don't think he did it, but I mean, there's still the possibility he did it, but I'm leaning more towards the possibility he didn't do it. But nonetheless, like, Jake is adamant about, like, he didn't do this, so I need you to stop saying Oscar did it. Like, because the more time you spend saying that Oscar did do it, the more sure the police are that they caught their killer, and that they're going to just, not actually look for the real killer. So Alan kind of, talking to Jake, kind of makes the promise that he's like, you know what? Okay, I'll cut back on how much I, talk about Oscar and make it all about Sarah. It's, because he had talked to Jake and found out, it's like, okay, Sarah told me about you, that you broke her heart, because Jake had talked about that before, that things broke off just because kind of similar reasons why things weren't working with Jake, just because career kind of came first and she kind of came second. So, but luckily when it was all said and done, going back to the Trinity thing, there were other people that kind of stepped forward. They found phone numbers and stuff for like people that were saying like, no, they were like victims came out and were like, no, this isn't right. He's a lying, disgusting monster, and he hurts a lot of people. Because the sad thing is, his wife was adamant about it. She's like, oh, this video is fake. There's no way that my husband did this. But, it's like after the victims talk, it put a different perspective for her. She's just like, I hope, she basically said, I hope you burn in hell. I think that's verbatim what she said. And it's just kind of like, well, you kind of deserve to be alone. You disgusting piece of crap. So that's just, at the very least, we, in some form, shape or form, he is getting justice. And then, I'll finish what I was about to say. The thing is, like, because earlier in the episode, Alexa kind of got quote unquote bought off, and she wasn't going to go on LHL like she was initially going to. And Jake was worried that, like, oh, like, Trinity's people paid her off. But it turns out not directly was it Trinity's people. It's actually the parent company, the one that has all his music and stuff like that. The parent company for where, the parent company to where Julia works. They tried to buy her off. But Alexa wasn't having that. What she decided to do is, what I'm actually going to do is take that money and basically essentially kind of sue Trinity's estate. You can't sue him, I mean, because he's already kind of getting caught up in his legal action, but you can sue his estate. And the fact is, Jake is going to represent her, especially, you know, finding out that it was like, oh, the parent company that tried to buy her off. So they're basically screwed in that department. She basically wants to use that money to sue them so that basically all the victims can get, you know, compensated, you know, like that they can get that money and do something with it. You know, it won't fix what happened to them, but at very least they can walk away with something, you know, get justice while at the same time take that money and do something positive with it. I mean, that's how I see it. Because interestingly enough, Jake ended up finding out that the moment he figured it out, I kind of figured it out too. Like, they found out, it's like, oh yeah, Jake, he didn't actually have a stroke. He was actually drugged with the same concoction that he'd been used on all these different women when he raped them. And the moment that crossed my mind, I was like, Alexa. So, and it turns out, yeah, she was like, basically, she found, because basically after it happened to her, she went back to, and basically went backstage or whatever, and ends up turning out, it's like, oh crap, like he's surrounding himself with other women, and to her, she's like, it's just basically him setting the field and trying to choose his next victim. And that's what prompted her to try to poison him, because it's like, he's going to be, you know, she can't follow him all around the world. She kind of had to strike now before his tour ended. So she used the same combination that he used on them, because if the dose isn't, I mean, all the concoction he used knocked the women out, but it could have killed them. And basically Alexa put it together so that it would kill him, but sadly it didn't. So that's where the whole proceedings of like, okay, get everything Trinity has, essentially. And an interesting thing that I was going to get to earlier, but I kind of pushed off towards all that, was the fact is that Luis, when it came to this story, Luis was very adamant about taking it. Now, like, we've come to see Luis in this past few episodes that it's like, oh, like, Julia and other people have to drag her out of the office to kind of talk about these stories. Not like she's kind of swept up in her own thing and they have to kind of pull her out of the office. But it's like, Julia was actually surprised. It's like, nope. Luis was out there ready ahead of time, being extremely professional, because she wanted this story kind of being told. And it's like, even with everything that's happened, like in these other things, but it was just kind of like, she didn't kind of have that party girl mentality we've kind of seen her have. Like, she was very adamant about telling the story, letting the public know. And it was just, it made me wonder, like, was it because someone that was close to her kind of experienced that, and that's what kind of prompted her to, like, switch up the way she's been so far? And it wasn't just that side of things. We also learned more about Luis in this episode too, because Julia, once again, one of those instances of Julia putting her job first, which Luis is fine with, but the fact is, Luis asked her not to do a story. Basically, there was a video going up about a soldier who was basically captured and beheaded. Luis did not want to do the story, didn't want to have the video pop up. They were going to censor it and everything, you know, cut away from it before the actual thing happened. But Luis was still adamant, like, no, we can't do that story. But it's like, Julia went ahead with it anyway, because she was like, oh yeah, it's okay. Like, Luis will be fine with it, because she likes a good exclusive, and, you know, just kind of like I said, that part of her that's just kind of like, whether she's a good person or not, I don't know. Would a good person necessarily do that? I don't know. Like I said, for her job comes first. But Luis got super upset about it. Like, I kind of figured as much. I was like, did she have someone who was connected to the military that died in a similar way? Which ended up kind of being the case, but it was basically, he wasn't someone necessarily directly connected with the military. It was just someone that she fell in love with died in a similar circumstance. If he was captured, he actually had, I forgot what it was, but basically it was something of his dad that brought his dad luck and got his dad through the Vietnam War and kind of brought him home safely, and it kind of brought him luck before. And before he left off, he gave it to Luis, who was also there kind of covering the stories as a reporter. And because he didn't have it with him, I mean, in her, you know, the way it makes it seem like, you know, his luck kind of ran out and he was beheaded. And because she went off on Julia, like, it's always like, oh, we're such good friends, for chummy and everything, but she called her a self-centered, scrawny bitch. And basically, Luis, like I said earlier, Luis pointed out, how many stories have I ever asked you not to go through? And she's like, one, this one. I know your job comes first, but I was hoping that our friendship would matter. Essentially, the reason why she's the way she is, drinking, always kind of moving on from guy to guy, because she needed a distraction. Because a man that she loved died in such a brutal way, and she just wanted. She knows she can never get over it, probably won't ever forget it, but at least she can distract herself. And it's like, basically that Julia, like they've been working together for 8 years, and Julia's never really even, she never even bothered to ask, why does Luis not want to do this story? Like, she was very adamant. She didn't say it once, she said it twice that she didn't want to do this story. It's like, no, we can't do that story. But Julia did it anyway. And she's so caught up in everything that she never bothered to ask Luis why. You know, a simple thing like that. It seems like even with throughout their friendship and everything, she doesn't know Luis as much as well as she thinks she does. Because she was basically, oh, why didn't you ever tell me? You could have told me. But it's like, it's something very painful that she didn't want to kind of be reminded of. And now because of that whole situation, has been reminded of it again. So, I mean, at the end of the episode, I don't know. Like, it did seem like it hit her. There was kind of a gut punch kind of look on her face, like, after it was all said and done. So, maybe, hopefully, they'll repair their relationship next episode. I don't know. Like, I don't know. I'm very curious to see, will we see Julia kind of develop? Will she always stay this way, or will she change and become more a person where she's more reluctant to do things? Like I said, it's hard to say whether she does things for the right reasons or not, whether what she's doing is good or bad. Because more often than not, it's leaning more towards like, man, you're just kind of a bad person. But it does seem like she does use her power for good sometimes too. I don't know. It's just, there's a very, very heavily shade of gray when it comes to Julia's character. So, I mean, I'm curious to see where everything goes, especially about the whole Oscar situation now that this whole Levi thing's come up. So. And now moving on to this week's episode of the Blacklist, we have Liz kind of finally back, you know, with the FBI to a certain extent. Obviously, like, they're kind of keeping her away from things, especially Wrestler, because he's kind of like, no, this is protocol. You guys are victims in this. We can't really let you in on it. But he's like, fine. You know what? Look through the files. It's going to cost me my job, but who cares, right? Which, interestingly enough, that was kind of an interesting thing in this episode. We kind of got to see, like, Tom and Liz kind of work together. Like, basically, they were there trying to get information about Agnes and Kirk. And then, like Tom acts like he's super angry, and Liz acts like she's upset, and they swipe a card off his head. Turn it like a little whole act. And it's very interesting because we never really get to see them kind of, like, come together like that, work in tandem like that. So it's just kind of interesting seeing them do that. But back to like the whole FBI thing, like, you know, like Iran was there and he hugged her. Like, you know, he was a little hesitant at first, but he hugged her. And, you know, Liz was apologizing. He's like, I didn't mean to hurt you. And Samara was like, no, you did. You didn't bother thinking about how it would affect us. And Iran's like, Samara, but she's like, Liz is like, no, she's right. We knew this would hurt you guys, but, you know, we had to do what we had to do to protect our child. Basically, everyone is pissed at her. Because Samara is basically saying, like, you know what, I still haven't forgiven you. Like, she understands why Liz did it, doesn't mean she has to accept it, you know? And you could tell it leaves a bad taste in her mouth, and it's just like, she's like, you know what, I'm just going to transfer. You won't have to worry about seeing me around here anymore. And so, it's kind of interesting, like, because she has a conversation with Reddington about trying to track down Agnes, and Red's like, okay, I'm on it, but you're not going to be a part of this. She's like, I understand that you and everyone, you know, is pissed at me about this whole situation, about faking my death, but I did what was best for my child. Still doesn't make it any better what you did. I mean, because even it comes up in conversation later on where Liz is like, thank you, Samara, for doing this. I know this isn't the easiest thing, but I appreciate what you're doing. And Samara's like, let's not get into this. And Liz is like, oh, she hates me. And then Amara's like, Iran's kind of like, yeah, she does, but, you know, give her time. And then he's like, we all need it. And then she's like, all need it. So do you hate me too? And he's like, I don't hate you. I hate what you did though, you know? So it's, like I said, it's understandable why she did what she did, but it doesn't make it that much easier because they're like family to her. And it's like, we get you want to protect your family, but we would have been there for you. We would have helped you protect your family. If you had let us in on it, we would have definitely done something to help you out, essentially. Because remember, Samara was there for her during the whole pregnancy thing. I think, she was actually the first one amongst the group to actually find out about Liz being pregnant, wasn't she? And she was there kind of helping her out through the whole thing. So, you know, for her, Samar kind of looked at her as like a very good friend because as we like I brought it up before, Samar has a very messed up family situation. Like I said, I brought up her brother as an example. And so, like I said, like this was kind of a new family for her, and it just kind of fell apart because of what Liz did. Being betrayed by family again is not something she can easily come back from. And that's the thing. I wonder, does Liz finally recognize that? Why it pisses Samar off so much? And what's really sad about it is that Samar, at the end of the episode, we see her putting her transfer in. And then she calls Iran because she kind of wanted to she was hesitant to send it in, but she just kind of wanted to talk to Iran to kind of, get his perspective on it, kind of like, kind of talk her out of doing it. But while he's on the phone with her, a girl, as we see, comes into the apartment, strips down naked, and talks to him while he's on the phone. And then Samar's like, "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't." And Iran's trying to keep talking to her, but she hangs up, and so she sends the email. Iran was like her last reason for staying because she liked him. Maybe, I guess you could argue it's like she waited a little too long to make a move or something. It seemed like he kind of moved on. Like, even when it was all said and done, it did seem like Iran still had feelings for her. Maybe that was something different. I mean, it seems pretty cut and dry, but hey, let's leave it open to the possibility that it was not what we think it is. But I think it is. And it's sad because like Samar actually did have feelings for him for this entire time. She recognized he had feelings for her, but she kind of waited too long, and he kind of waited too long. And just, I mean, I'm very curious to see what her ultimate decision is at the end of the episode. And also in this episode, we also learned a little bit more about Liz's, mom in particular, because Liz ended up getting some pictures of her, pictures of some stuff from Kirk's house, the Summer Palace, but also ended up finding her mom's journal, and she ended up reading it a little bit. She ended up finding out, she's like, I got to this point in the chapter, in the diary, where basically she's talking about the fact is that you were pressuring her into leaving my dad. And then she started reading it a little bit more. Interesting, we end up finding out the fact is that Reddington was kind of like a plant, Liz's mom was a plant for Reddington. She was meant to seduce him. By who and for what reasons? I mean, I don't know. That's not clear. It makes you wonder, did Reddington know that? I get the feeling that he did know, and that probably sours that relationship a little bit. Interesting, like really quickly, she brought up her father in the journals of like the fact that her dad would frown upon her about this whole situation. Like I said, her dad is still alive because Reddington met him last season, so I'm very curious, will he pop up again and that be an opportunity? Because he still hasn't presented that to Liz. It's like, if he wanted Liz on his side, he should like be more open to like helping her out. Like, okay, you want to learn more about your family? Like, well, here, your grandfather's still alive. Come talk to him. He thought you were dead, and thought his great grandchild was dead too, without ever getting to know either one of you. So, but Reddington is still keeping that close to the vest. So, but the fact of the matter, because the moment I heard that. But Liz immediately brought up the thing I was thinking of immediately. It's like, it reflects heavily on her and Tom's situation, because Tom was meant to be brought into her life to kind of seduce and keep her close. So, it's actually quite sad, because that's why I'm wondering, did Reddington know? Like, I mean, it'd be really messed up if he never knew. I mean, even if he does know, does know, does that change his feelings for her? I don't think it does. I'm sure that's, for Liz's mom, like, her main focus was protecting Liz. Like, she's like kind of caught in that situation. She really didn't know what she was going to do because Red is telling her to run off with her. But she's like, Masha, Liz, is like the most important thing to her. It's like, most important part of her life right now. And it's like, basically, I have to do what's best for her. So, maybe that's why Reddington has been so adamant about protecting her. It's because he wants to keep a promise to Liz's mom, because he knew Liz's mom wouldn't do everything she could to protect Liz, and maybe that's what Reddington's trying to do, trying to live up to, what Liz's mom would have wanted. But like I said, it seems like there's so much more to the story that we're not getting. And I brought it up last time, Well, I don't know. Like, I actually have to think about it. I don't remember if I brought this up last time because I know I had it in my notes, but I don't really look through my notes. And I take notes during the shows, but I don't really look through them a lot of times when I'm recording. Like 95% of the time, I don't, unless I'm going back to like, oh yeah, remember a certain name or something like that. Or there was something I was like, oh yeah, I wanted to talk about, but I like I have a vague notion of it, but I don't remember it exactly. Anyway, the point I was bringing up is the fact, I don't know whether I mentioned it last episode or not, but the fact is that Reddington and Kirk could both be lying, but at the same time telling the truth. That they're telling parts of the truth, but not all of the truth, and certain things are lied and skewed. Maybe in one situation, like Reddington's situation, maybe he's lying to protect her from something, or maybe he's trying to shield her from something. The whole like thing she found out before that, like, oh, she shot her dad, but Kirk said like, oh, that's a lie, but it's like, was it a lie? I don't know, because Reddington is holding on to a lot of secrets, and he's not willing to let any of them go. Means he's going to be it's going to tear Liz away from him, so that's why he's keeping him so close to the vest, because he's afraid he's going to lose her. So, and because I guess for Reddington, I've always put that out there, is the fact is Liz is like a daughter to him, and he doesn't want to lose that connection to her. So, another thing quickly I want to kind of bring up is the fact is that Tom going undercover in this episode. It astonishes me. It reminds you over and over again just how good Tom is at doing what he does. Like immediately, like he literally just got like, oh, like this fake background he needs to kind of go undercover with this group. And it's like, he's got it memorized just like that. Even wrestlers like, okay, yeah, I gotta admit, he's pretty good at this. It's like, yeah, you forget that sometimes just how, like in a matter of like, I mean, there's no like real time distinction of how long that took him, but it couldn't have been that long because I'm pretty sure Reddington tried to get that deal set up as soon as possible, trying to slip Tom undercover with that guy. And it's like, I don't know. He's just fantastic at doing what he does. Like, he's basically a natural born liar. I mean, granted, he's had years and years of training and practice and missions of having to be someone else. Like, I guess the key part of, like, it's almost like being an actor. Like, actors are like the greatest liars of all. That's what makes a great actor, is the fact is that they don't just lie to you, they lie to themselves. They make you believe that this character is who I am. I breathe this person because that is who I am. I'm no longer who I really am. This is who I really am, type of thing. So it's something I was interested in, like that very conversation is something I was thinking about earlier, like today, and it just kind of happened to fit with this episode, and in particular this whole Tom thing. So it's like he's very good at lying, because I guess for him, he kind of lost his identity a long time ago, because his original name is Jacob, but he left that life behind the moment the Major kind of trained him to be who he is. So he no longer has an identity. So I guess that's why it's easy for him to assume one, because he's bounced from one to one all throughout his life. He's never been one consistent person, because I guess for him, Jacob is dead, long since died a long time ago, the moment the Major took him under his wing. So, and then finally, we ended up finding out that what went down in this episode, this whole, like, the team that Tom was a part of, what they were trying to accomplish was they were basically stealing some viruses and pathogens. That basically the whole thing at the beginning was all a ploy to basically get the CDC to secretly move all their large storage of, like I said, viruses and vaccines, like HIV, all these different bad viruses. And one particular virus this episode was basically what Kirk needed. Like, this is all tying into Kirk, because the blacklister this episode was Miles McGrath. Essentially, he invested into crime, essentially. He was part of a startup business. The business boomed. He sued, got like a crap ton of money, and now he invests that money in crime businesses. It's like, oh, if a crime interests him, he goes, okay, I'm going to invest money in it, and he takes a cut of the profits and stuff like that. Anyway, he was getting stuff from Kirk, because that was going to be Reddington's whole play to get towards Kirk, but Kirk kind of saw through him and kind of anticipated it. He's just kind of like, oh, basically taunting Red, being like, oh, I'm smarter than you, that I'm always going to be a step ahead of you in this whole situation. And it ends up revealing to Tom and Liz that the virus he took, essentially it was going to give Kirk leukemia. Basically, the disease he has is a genetic disease. It's killed a lot of males in his families, as we kind of read in Liz's mom's journal. that's why her mom was very happy to have a girl, because the disease kind of only passes to the males in their family. So it was kind of a good thing. Basically, if the way the journal made me think, it almost seemed like she was saying like the disease would die with Kirk, but the way I don't know, I interpret it as like she kind of wanted Kirk to die, and she's glad that the disease was taking him. Maybe that's not how she was writing it, but that's just how I took it. Just like I said, I don't know. Maybe he really is her father. I don't know. Like I said, Reddington's not told her everything, but I highly doubt Kirk's told her everything too. Because also, because to the point I was trying to make, its effect is that essentially the disease he has is basically eating up all his white blood cells and slowly killing him that way. And basically this virus would end up giving him leukemia, which basically overproduces red blood cells. So basically it would balance out. It's like his disease is basically eating away at the blood cells, but the leukemia is actually giving him more. So basically it counteracts, the two illnesses counteract each other, kind of adds like in a sick, twisted way, a kind of balance in his body. And it will give him an extra couple years without the disease completely killing him. Granted, it will ultimately kill him, so it will give him a couple years. And then she's like, Liz is thinking like, there's no way he would do that. No one would be crazy enough to do that. And Reddington explains that's why he's been so adamant about getting you, about getting Agnes. It's not about trying to get you away from me. It's trying to keep you for himself, because you guys are his cure. Because basically, along with this, he needs a descendant, kind of like blood from another descendant. So it could either be Agnes or Liz. So, like I said, very interesting developments. I'm almost skipping over the other big thing. Obviously, we found out in the last episode that Kate wasn't dead, and we've basically seen her kind of drag herself away, and she ended up being found by someone. Who it was, we don't know, because her face is kind of blocked out by the sun when she was kind of looking up to him, but they kind of drag her off somewhere. So I'm very curious where that's going to go. Like I said, I part of me was thinking like, maybe Reddington left her alive on purpose because, he wanted to leave her with, like, I kind of don't think he left her alive on purpose. I don't think that was the case, but she's a fighter and she survived. And I'm just worried that she's basically going to get revenge on Reddington, because she's going to be the opponent he's not going to see coming, because she's a woman that knows everything. That's why he decided to kill her, is because he couldn't trust her anymore, and she knows all his secrets, all his weaknesses. And part of me's thinking maybe eventually she will go and side with Alexander Kirk, because maybe in her mind it's like, yes, this is all about protecting Liz, but keeping Agnes and Liz away from Reddington, and like Kirk is the lesser of the two evils in that type of situation. That's what I'm kind of leaning towards, but maybe it's going to be someone else that she decides to side up, kind of side with, or maybe she decides to take revenge against him, into her own hands, or maybe, just maybe, we'll get into a situation where she's like, no, I'm not going to get revenge for you. I understand why you did what you did, but you have to understand why I did, so I'm not coming after you. But then that lead to a problem. He's like, well, you're not dead, and I see that you're alive, so now I'm going to make sure I have to kill you, because I can't take the chance, because in his line of business, you can't take chances with liabilities, essentially, is what I'm getting at. So, she'd be a liability. That's why he tried to kill her in the first place. So, very interested to see where that goes. Just all these different developments, I'm curious to see how it all plays out. I did kind of one final note. I like that whole conversation Iran had with Samar, where basically he's like, oh yeah, symmetry. Like, he's like, yeah, everyone, there's symmetrical faces and everything, trying to get, like, only has that one angle of that guy's face, and is trying to figure out how to recreate the other half of him to kind of get a better look at what he looks like. But then basically bringing up the fact is that Samar doesn't have a symmetrical face, and she's like, wait, what? He's like, the fact is your eye's a little bit bigger than your other eye, but it's like super adorable, plus your chin does. And she's like, yeah. And then basically later on, he's like, yeah, because, actually no one has a symmetrical face, is what he was kind of saying later on, and she kind of smiled towards it. So that's why that whole situation about him having another girlfriend, kind of just having a girlfriend, not another girlfriend, but having a girlfriend in general, just kind of is sad, because it's like they obviously like each other, but it's just, timing was terrible. It's just they didn't take the opportunity when they had the chance, and I thought they were going to, especially with the whole Liz situation. I thought they were going to take that chance, but Sadly, they didn't. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. To the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.